Chris, what is the thought process of replacing keys with Sorin? So the thought process behind that is that I don't think there are a lot of matchups that key actually improves. I think that it's fine against aggro decks, and it's fine to have in play against control decks, but I feel like Sorin, provided you actually have the mana base necessary to resolve it on turn 4, does more to beat aggro decks and a lot more to beat brushstroke decks than Key does. And I also think that it's probably a better threat to resolve than a Key in control mirrors, which, it provides two bodies that are both relevant things that need to be answered in control mirrors and can actually be card advantage and win the game in a control mirror, which Key provides a mana advantage, which is reasonable and isn't nothing. But on the whole of things, I think that Sorin just does more most of the time and does a lot more some of the time. Alright, yeah, let's represent having Vanishing Verse, I guess. Opponent doesn't need to know I don't have the ability to do anything. Keys were sort of replaced with Sorins. I think I replaced Keys with, like, a third Sorin. Well, relative to the stock lists, this list is playing Sorins and not playing Keys, so relative to stock lists rather than my previous lists, that is sort of the change. Kazandu Mammoth isn't totally good, but yeah. So, comparing Sorin to Key in this spot, this is one of the spots where I think Key is good, because my opponent isn't super representing taking over the game immediately, and mana advantage, if I were to have Discover the Formula and Lier, is a really big factor. But, like, this is the best case for Key, and Sorin is still pretty good here. So the fact that Key isn't terribly better in what I think is its best case scenario says to me that when I kind of prefer Sorin against control decks and prefer it against the brushstroke decks by a lot, that is kind of why I think it's a better card overall. Like, my opponent can kill Sorin here, and I gain 8 life and have a 2/3 lifelinker in exchange for that. That's a pretty big deal. Because I just get to go no blocks, and my opponent threw all of this damage at Sorin. I think that Key is very appealing when played with Hero. Or, not Hero, when played with Teferi. But I think Teferi, when played without Key, is kind of garbage. And so I don't like the fact that you have to fill up your deck with cards I don't like in order to make those cards that I don't like good when you happen to draw and resolve both of them. That just... I would greatly prefer to just include cards in the deck that are good on their own, so that more combinations of draws are viable. Or are higher average quality, rather. Forsaken Crossroads enters tapped because I was the starting player. Got it. Yeah, I kind of want to play the Lier so I have a blocker here. I guess that I can shock Seagate Restoration to play Discover the Formula next turn if necessary. I want to hold on to the 2/3, because I do think that that has some potential as a blocker here. Although maybe I'm just supposed to attack in this position to gain the life. The 2/3 is representing preventing the Stormseeker from attacking, but the Lier is also doing that, so that might be redundant. I suppose depending on what they gave haste, I would currently be representing a double block if they... I don't know. The Lier isn't doing too much, so I might be willing to just trade it if needs be. Like, if they just played a land and pumped the Mammoth up to a 5/5, and weren't representing any other tricks somehow, I might just double block the Mammoth with the Lier and the 2/3. Giving the Helena haste. Oh, okay, cool. This is neat ordering. I've never seen Stormseeker with Helena and Helena before, somehow. I guess I've always had removal. So you pump the Helena before the trigger resolves, and then it puts 3 counters on something? Or you don't do that. Okay. Did that work the way that I thought it did? Because I thought that worked pretty cool. Opponent seems to think it doesn't, though. Alright, Helena and Helena, what do we do about you? Okay, so they could have given the Helena and Helena haste and then put 3 counters on the Stormseeker, which would have resulted in a much better attack for them. The Mammoth would have 1 less power, which doesn't matter, but the Stormseeker wouldn't be vulnerable to getting double blocked. And I think I want to double block it here because my Lier isn't actually terribly meaningful. And denying them the ability to make that line happen next turn seems like a good idea. We did draw an untapped land, which was very nice. No attacks, set up for chump blocks. I should have sorcery speed to discover the formula. I'm still really bad at day-night. That's a hard thing to remember, especially when nothing on the board is actually affected by it, but they could totally play something, especially with the ability to give it a haste, that punishes me for this. I do think the mana advantage from Key is good. It's not that I think that Key is bad, it's that I think Key is worse than Sorin by a very small amount, and that I am not willing to play Teferi. Yeah. I guess this doesn't make a difference that it's night, because I'm still chump blocking the Tovolar either way, so I'm taking the same amount of damage. But if I can't flip it back to day, then it'll have made a difference. Oh, right, opponent can't attack with Helena because... So I guess I actually did prevent 2 damage by letting it flip to night, because representing a block with Hive the Eye Tyrant prevents my opponent from attacking here. Maybe that's worth having let it become night? Possibly. True that it'll flip back today because the opponent casts 2 spells. So I needed to be able to have a sorcery speed spell to prevent it from flipping again. Luckily for me, I do. Yeah, the red-green stuff being immune to Vanishing Verse really is actually kind of a significant deal. I don't have anything meaningful that I can flash back with this Lier, but I can play the Vanishing Verse to exile the Kazandu Mammoth, or possibly something else that they buff with Helena and Helena. I think I'm supposed to go with white on this. I don't want to draw a land next turn. Okay, so it's not flipping tonight. I have Vanishing Verse for something. Hopefully I don't have to chump block. Is Path of Peril a good board wipe? I think depending on the number of board wipe slots you have to run, I like the 3-mana white board wipe better. What about adding the 5-mana exile all creatures? Yeah, I think that one's just worse than Meathook Massacre, and I'm already playing a lot of Meathook Massacres. Townraiser Tyrant, okay. So we assume that's going to get targeted by Helena and Helena. Opponent's debating whether they want to get rid of the cheaper blocker or the more expensive, bigger blocker. They go for the cheaper blocker. The fact that the opponent didn't... Oh, the Dueling Rapier is... Flash. Cool. That's no good. So any block I make gets killed by the Dueling Rapier. Does that mean that I have to block Tovolar? Now, if I block Helena and Helena, I go to 1, but then they would just put it on the Helena and Helena. So I probably block the Gazandu Mammoth. I guess the Tovolar draws a card, and that's kind of concerning, in a sense. I could block it. I think I kind of need to hit Meathook Massacre or I lose here anyway, so I might as well prevent maximum damage. I don't think my Lier being in play ever matters, and I don't think that I can actually block in a way that keeps my Lier in play anyway. I'm dead to Snakeskin Veil here, but yeah, I can't do anything about that. You were willing to play Blood on the Snow last week, but Path Barrel is basically the same card, but sometimes you get to cast it for 3. Well, I was willing to play Blood on the Snow when we were playing Geist Channeler, which I ended up being pretty sure is not supposed to be in this list for the same reason that I ended up cutting it out of Izzet. What does this being in play do differently? I can still Meathook Massacre for 5 either way. Pretty sure I'm supposed to sacrifice this. Now let's top deck Meathook Massacre. Did not top deck Meathook Massacre. Okay. So in that case, Discover the Formula, 2 spells, bounce, bounce, dead. Not a lot of ways around being extremely dead here, I don't think. Or is Parasitic Grasp actually a spell that keeps me alive, maybe? I don't actually have to cast this yet, because it's not going to flip tonight. I forgot Parasitic Grasp with Discover the Formula is pretty cool. I don't think the math on this favors me at all, but we shall see. Discovering during their turn flips it to night. But also, I kind of cast Discover the Formula not thinking I actually had any outs whatsoever. The fact that Parasitic Grasp means I maybe sort of have an out was kind of a surprise to me. Alright, this means that I definitely have to target Helena and Helena. I go up to 7. No! That means I still die! Ah, that's a bummer. So I guess I needed them to not have a threat. And to have to put Helena and Helena on something that I would have been willing to bounce. Yeah, alright, so I die here. Ah, that was close. It was close. I guess if they put it on anything other than Tovolar, I probably still die. No, because I can just leave Helena and Helena alone. So I bounce whatever they put the counters on and then kill the other human. So yeah, there was actually a way I could have stayed alive for another turn there. If they didn't have a threat, they layer me. Yeah, that probably was also good enough, but never write off the opportunity for the opponent to just make a mistake. If you conceded every time you were dead on board, you'd lose a lot less off, or you'd lose a lot more often. Alright, Infernal Grasp, Parasitic Grasp, Imrith. I'm beginning to become convinced that I should probably just play another Parasitic Grasp instead of the Imrith. most likely. I could also... Hullbreaker Horror seems really sketchy, but maybe it's something I bring in instead of break expectations. I really doubt it, though. Ooh. Buenoite Cristudo. Are you going to play the Arena Open? Yes. I have no clue what deck. Still kind of figuring that out. I haven't really... Normally I hit onto a deck and just kind of play it, but I haven't been playing as much off stream as I normally do because I've been doing, well, spending more hours trying to learn how to do video editing for YouTube. And as a result, well, partially as a result of less time, but also as a result of trying to figure out more content-y stuff, I've been just naturally spending less time on any one deck and more trying to keep up a variety of decks played. So I haven't really got one deck I'm lined in on right now. No. Bye-bye, friend. Not looking to get banned from anything. Hello. So I banned that person, and now there's a dialogue window stuck on this that I can't close because it's too far over and it's blocking all of chat. How do I... There we go. Okay, excellent. Totally great content, speaking of which, because nobody can see my OBS window. Great. Your last name sounds kind of Portuguese. So it is. It's a Portuguese last name from my... Well, I suppose it would make sense for it to be from my dad's side of the family, wouldn't it? My dad's side of the family, going back, came from Hawaii, and then the Azores before that, and then presumably Portugal before that. But kind of so far back that nobody living in the family has any memory whatsoever of even knowing the language or any kind of cultural heritage. Which is probably a pretty familiar story for a lot of people living in America these days. Alrighty, tested Orzhov midrange. Do you have a list? I have not tested Orzhov midrange. That, to me, has looked like one of the variations of Brushstroke midrange. And I do think those decks are very reasonable, but I'm also not certain whether mid-range versions of Brushstroke decks are better than aggro versions. They are certainly better against creature decks and better against one another, but they're a little worse against Esper Control, and I think Esper Control is probably the deck you should be most concerned with beating. Not because I think it's going to be the most popular deck, although it'll be pretty close, I would assume, but because I think it's probably the best deck, and so it is probably the deck you'll see the most in day 2. Ooh, wow, this curve out is just delightful. This is so much better than Key, by like a lot right now. No, Botelho is not my maiden name as it happens. Although, maybe if I get married one day. Who knows? How come Sorin doesn't start at 5 so I can down tick it twice and then have it stick around? I feel like that would make the card better. I don't know why they didn't do that. Alright, well the good news is that my 2-3 does get to block Ulvenwald Oddity, if that's what I want. Is that what I want? It's probably what I want, right? And then I'm only taking 1 on the Sorin and I get to uptick it. I get a card out of that. And then the opponent has to waste another attack on it. And that seems fine. Oh, and maybe I don't even have to lose the Sorin? Swell. Alright, Sorin. You've gained, like, 10 life so far. And drew a card. That seems like a pretty good use of 4 mana. Why doesn't Sorin's -2 also draw 5 cards? I know, right? It's like they didn't even want it to be good. Chris, can one of Lolth replace one Sorin in this deck? I don't think I would want to do that because I don't think this deck is very good at fueling Lolth's loyalty, and I don't think that the deck making a couple of 2/1s is terribly meaningful for it, whereas the fact that Sorin makes tokens that block really well at a relevant point in the game, I could let this resolve so that I don't get blown out by a Snakeskin Veil, and then I just Memory Deluge instead. Snakeskin Veil also means that I don't get to Meathook Massacre to kill things, so I think I just let this happen.
Know that I will not abandon my quest.
But I think that the biggest matchup where Sorin helps is against Brushstroke decks, and it's because the tokens are just a really inconvenient size for them to deal with. It blocks a lot of stuff, and I wonder if they forgot it whether it was night. But most of all, the fact that your Sorin tokens can just attack the Brushstroke player and actually present a clock while putting you out of burn range is really nice. Okay, yeah, I guess a Rehilda. Ah, so many threats that Vanishing Verse doesn't cleanly answer, huh? I'm kind of tempted to just take Meathook Massacre and Memory Deluge, but maybe I'm supposed to take like Memory Deluge plus the land? Keep making land drops. Vanishing Verse also technically answers Lier the Hydra. I guess I could just choose not to take Meathook Massacre, couldn't I? Alright, let's go with Memory Deluge and Vanishing Verse then. We'll see how incredibly sketchy this is. I was on the play. Pretty sure I'm supposed to kill the Ulanwad Oddity. What are the chances that the opponent has a protection spell here, huh? They super had priority there. No, that's because of Lier of the Hydra, isn't it? And they just moused over Lier of the Hydra to check. Okay, so that probably wasn't Snakeskin Veil. But it could be. I'm just going to have to really hope it isn't. Please don't have Snakeskin Veil, opponent. This is another one of the reasons that Lier of the Hydra is absolutely stellar. If the opponent didn't have Lier of the Hydra in play there, they don't get to blow me out like that. Specifically, in case that wasn't clear, when I passed through to my second main phase, they had a stop like they had a spell, but because there was a Lier of the Hydra, it means that they get priority to activate Lier of the Hydra anytime they have 1 green mana open. So I had to question whether they had priority because of Lier of the Hydra or the Snakeskin Veil, and I didn't get to get the free information that I would otherwise. Really quite a bummer. So I can Vanishing Verse the Ulanwad Oddity if I wanted to, and I probably want to. I guess I'm still at 21 life somehow. I have gained a lot of life this game. My brain is acting like this is over because of the Ulanwad Oddity surviving, but I guess I still have a couple of turns before I die. I kind of want to play this Imrith to block stuff. Ooh, Lier seems good. But I could also just hold up Divide by Zero and cast Vanishing Verse instead, which is probably a better use of my turn. Whatever they have... No, wait. Is it... The fact that these don't expire is really confusing. They did uptick the other side of Arlen, so they can cast spells with Flash here. Depending on what they cast, I might Divide by Zero and Vanishing Verse the Ulvenwald Oddity and force the Arlen to not be a 5/5. This was on red. So if I Divide by Zero this pack leader, it doesn't get recast here. I would like to Vanishing Verse the Oddity and see if they try to do anything. They don't. Okay. I probably... How much do I care about turning it back to day? Do I even want to? I don't actually think I want to. So I let this pack leader resolve. On the off chance they have another creature to play here. I prefer the information. And now I think I just Divide by Zero before the opponent gets to draw a protection spell. And I think I probably just snag Mascot Exhibition. Whether or not Mascot Exhibition is what I play here, I don't know. But so we gave them access to additional mana by doing it this way, but we denied them the ability to put +1/+1 counters on stuff and play it with Flash. We'll see how relevant that winds up being. Tovolar means they get to draw a card now. I don't love that. Playing Lier right now. Parasitic Grasp and Vanishing Verse aren't terribly useful, although actually Parasitic Grasp is pretty good if the opponent flips it back to day willingly. What do you think, opponent? Do you flip it back to day willingly? It does make no sense that Lier the Hydra gives priority when X is 0. I assume it's because it's coded in a way that they made it so you can't choose 0, but the game still acts like 0 is a valid cost. It's weird. I know it's how it behaves, I don't know why it's how it behaves. So the opponent did indeed not flip it back here, which means that if I play Lier, I'll have a removal spell if they play Pack Leader, but nothing otherwise. Alternatively, I could just play Mascot Exhibition, or I could just play Imrith. I think I kind of prefer playing Mascot Exhibition here. They don't usually play like Dragonfire. And I think this gives me a good set of blocks. Nothing good on Arlen, which is fine. I've got enough life total that Arlen can just punch me for a couple of turns and it's not the end of the world. They can pump Arlen up to do 9 damage here, which is sort of scary, but yeah, still. Valky holds priority even when tapped out because the way the rules are worded, it is a legal 0 mana ability. So, for example, Tovolar holds priority anytime you have green and red up. Lier holds priority anytime you have green up. And Hall of Storm Giants holds priority anytime you have 6 mana up. The game is, I think, programmed to read mana costs in a way that tries to... Why did they not target... What do you... Does this mean that the opponent has Snakeskin Veil? Why did we remove those two? Did they forget that Arlen has Trample? I'm so confused. They didn't want me to have 5 power and blockers? Because if they just paid 1 more and chose to kill the 4/4 instead, then they could attack with Tovolar. I guess I still would have a double block set up? I'm uncertain. Hydra is not a legal play in the sense that the text of the ability says that it's not a legal choice to choose 0, but the way I expect the rules engine is programmed only looks at the stuff to the left of the semicolon when choosing whether it's legal. Actually, that's a really interesting question. Unexpected Windfall. If you have Unexpected Windfall and 4 mana open and no cards in hand to discard, does it hold priority? I've never actually tested that. Oh, Vanishing Verses are so weird here. Arlen, why can I not Parasitic Grasp you? Okay, we're just going to play Emrith then. I could try to punch the Arlen here. Do I want to do that? I probably want to do that. I think I want to do that, and I should have done that before playing the Emrith. I gave my opponent extra information on this block for no particular reason. It also doesn't hold priority for activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. That's true. That's true. I do imagine that trying to program a thing that has an X cost, trying to add a one-of exception, like this ability, would be kind of complicated to program. Are there any other examples of... there's the thieving pirate thing that's got a kicker cost with this kicker can't be 0. Okay. Oh, am I dead? No, I go to 1, right? I kind of forgot Tovolar had an activated ability. Was I dead to a land drop with the way I did this? I think I've been just dead to a land drop and kind of missed that that was a thing, huh? They didn't want to do 1 more to trample and draw a card? Okay. Would it ever be legal for Valky to activate as X for 0? Yeah. If you actually have a 0-cost creature underneath it, totally legal. Also true that you can activate it regardless of an exiled card. I think you can activate Valky's ability even if there's no card underneath it. Which could technically matter because there are things that do things whenever you activate abilities. Usually it's your opponent's stuff that pings you whenever you activate an ability. But if you wanted to lose life for whatever reason, you could do that. So Tovolar, I believe, if I don't misunderstand it, you draw a card for every werewolf that does damage. So if they had pumped it up to a 6-power creature, they would have trampled through for 1 over my Emrith, which would have drawn them an extra card. So yeah, they did draw 1 card, but they could have drawn 2 cards. Opponent really doesn't want to play Werewolf Pack Leader. Goodness gracious. I'm kind of regretting not taking that land with Memory Deluge earlier. Oh, so the opponent activates Lier the Hydra here. I get to Vanishing Verse that to actually kill the Arlen. Hoping the opponent didn't draw a protection spell. They did not. Cool. Alright, now and in the interest of not taking a ton of damage from Lier the Hydra, we're just going to jam the Lier, which probably is the right move anyway. But considering my opponent ended that turn with, I think, like 2 mana that they never wound up using, I bet they wished that they had drawn a card instead. We do indeed parse the natural language. It's what generates the card's codes. I keep meaning to do an AMA or something about it, but never find the time. Interesting. I wonder what that sentence means. They didn't activate Lair of the Hydra. Alright. I'm willing to lose to Giant Growth, opponent. I successfully didn't get hit by a lightning bolt. You love to see it. Alright. Opponent's at 17. We have lots of cards. Should I have Vanishing Verse, the Ulvenwald Oddity to prevent it from flipping to night? Probably. What's the worst that could happen? They play something that doesn't die to Parasitic Grasp now? Means humans don't program the cards. The program that programs that reads the Oracle text and programs the cards. Oh, interesting. Eye Tyrant. I should probably divide by 0 that. I could use more lands. And divide by 0ing a Eye Tyrant is sort of like having lands. How many basics do we have in play? Only 2. So I'm going to get Environmental Sciences and immediately top deck a basic. You should see untapped mono green Mythic. Deck I've been playing. 75% win rate, 190 matchups. I think that mono green is a totally reasonable deck. I just don't think it lines up well against Vanishing Verse Esper. And I think that's the deck that I want to try to orient my deck selection around right now. Because the thing we've been struggling against the most out of these green-red decks has been the inconvenience of multicolored cards and Eye Tyrant. And I think that's a pretty big upgrade for mono green right now. But I will agree that mono green's creature package against the other mid-range decks and creature decks is real cool. Okay. Sure. Too bad I can't flash in his Environmental Sciences before I draw a card. We didn't draw the basic! Oh! E6, 7. Although, I should probably still just, like, make a bunch of creatures, gain a bunch of life, kill the Werewolf Pack Leader, and then, like, make my opponent dead. I think that's the line we're going to go for here. Could have Jwari'd that snakeskin. I could have definitely tried. But I do remember how my Lier works. Occasionally. Occasionally. I may have forgotten sometimes, but I have not forgotten yet. Do I want to sacrifice this? Really, I'd rather have cast a Memory Deluge already, but what the heck. Take action. I don't need it. I got plenty of lands already. So what happens if they block, take 8? So all I have to do is remove a blocker? I wish I knew the math on whether Memory Deluging twice was more likely to find a removal spell here for Eye Tyrant than discover the formula. But alas, I don't know any math at all. I actually just need a removal spell, period. Well, opponent, you got a Snakeskin Veil? No, it was the Lair of the Hydra. Alright, so block. I think we'll win. Blocks. I'll leave behind one blocker just in case, but I think that's lethal. That is indeed lethal. Excellent. What do you think of Boros Dragons for the Arena Open this weekend? I think that Boros Dragons will be very played because it is a popular deck, and I think that is mostly due to it being fun and high rolly, and also a tribe that people like, but I don't think the deck's very good. It's just not... It lines up very poorly against the actually good decks in the format, and specifically, it's not very good against Esper or any of the brushstroke decks, and I don't really see much of a future in a deck that I don't think has a good matchup against the best decks in the format. But on a more fundamental level, the rationale I gave for why I don't think Dragons is a good aggro deck still applies, and I don't think the tools for it to be a mid-range deck exist. Yeah, and to clarify with what Came Dark was saying, I was not trying to make a tier list of where the decks are at in the metagame. I was making a tier list of how much I would recommend individual decks, and how much I would recommend learning them and trying to play them, and also to an extent how much I would recommend trying to beat them, although less true there. I do think that it's important to beat Dragons, because at least for the next week, I think that it's going to be a very popular choice. It is just not a deck I would advise anybody to try to learn or pick up, because I don't think you can build that deck in a way that has long-term viability. Puppy Nick, thanks for the follow. Glad you're enjoying the stream. Let's see, changes on any of this? Nah. If you're not a control player, I think the aggro list I would most recommend right now is a green-red one, exactly like what our opponent is playing here. I think that's the aggro list that has the most ability to exploit Esper's removal package. What's your opinion on Alchemy now that it's been out for a couple of months? I like Alchemy. It's fun. It's... Can I keep this hand? It seems like a pretty bad hand. Actually, it doesn't do anything, so probably not. Can I keep this hand? Well, I'm gonna try. How am I playing this? I think I'm leading on Deserted Beach. I do like Alchemy, and I think the gameplay has been fun, but I also generally am a fan of any format where control deck mirrors are a major part of the format. Kessig Naturalist is a really brutal 2-drop, because now I can't hold up Jwari Disruption. Fun fact, right after I left Chris's tier list stream, hopped onto another streamer at the exact moment they were talking about how great the Dragons deck is. I get it. I think that it's really tricky to identify what makes Dragons look like such a good deck, but miss why it's very difficult to intuit how much variance a deck has, especially when you're not playing it. But yeah, this is probably me just super losing. Is blue-red Dragons good, or is just mono-red the way to go? I think blue-red Dragons is kind of a different list, but I wouldn't really recommend any of them, per se. A big part of the Dragon type probably has to do with how big / runaway the quick wins are, leaves an impression. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think I have to hold up Jwari Disruption here. How are we playing this? Black, untapped. Dragons is possibly the most poignant example of the concept of, like, the way Tron looks broken when you play against it, and your brain only ever really... Okay, I can't beat that. Only ever really internalizes the way that you lose to it, and your brain doesn't do a good job of remembering all of the times that, like... So, like, for example, when you have your opponent play a Fearsome Whelp on turn 2, your brain immediately starts to commit that moment to long-term memory as this Dragons deck is so busted. This is so unfair. Yada, yada, yada. And your brain doesn't even realize the opponent literally drew that with no other Dragons in hand, and it was a total colossal failure for the deck. But immediately your brain is starting to think, this Dragons deck is good. And that's because human brains are kind of really garbage at actual valid statistical data gathering and analysis. And Dragons is a deck that, similar to Tron, really preys on that weakness in the way our brains process data.